Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to our pro-life MAGA broadcast. Are you ready to win some elections? Are you ready to see some victories for the cause of life and for the cause of America? If so, you've come to the right place. Are you ready to do your part to win victories in this midterm election? If so, this is the place to be, and this is the place to bring others, because we are pulling out all the stops. We are having these broadcasts and delving deeply into the things we need to know and the things we need to do for victory in these elections. Tonight, I want to talk to you about what is the fundamental moral issue at stake in elections. The fundamental moral and political question we have to ask any candidate for public office. And it has to do with the issue that also I've devoted my entire life and ministry to, and that is the ongoing tragedy of abortion. I want to talk with you tonight, brothers and sisters, about why this is at the heart and core of every issue. We're talking about making America great again, and that means many things. America was founded on the greatness of the principles that are articulated in the Declaration of Independence, principles that people from all over the world embrace, and therefore they come here to America. America was not created based on a geography or ethnicity like other countries. It's the principles, it's the ideas that gave birth to this nation, and people become Americans not in the same way that you would think of becoming members of other countries. Becoming members of other countries would have more to do with changing your ethnicity, but when you think about it, becoming an American has a quality all its own. You're embracing an ideal and an idea and principles and a philosophy that the founders knew and that they articulated, that they drew, in fact, from their Christian faith and from the Word of God as found in the Scriptures. There was no source that the founding fathers wrote more about or quoted more frequently or used to derive their ideas than sacred Scripture. And so we're talking about a greatness which is rooted in fundamental principles, and the Declaration says first is life. That we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's a reason why life is mentioned first, and that is because without it, you don't have liberty or the pursuit of happiness or any other right. And that's a theme we'll delve into a little bit more in detail tonight. But I want to start by zeroing in on this diagram, brothers and sisters, because when we talk about abortion and why abortion is such a critical issue in elections, we're not talking about an abstraction. We're talking about this. This is a dismemberment abortion of a 23-week-old baby. Now, every abortion is equally wrong, but this is particularly horrifying when you see how it is carried out. And this is from the medical textbooks. I didn't make this up. This is a diagram from Nucleus Medical Media. They make medical diagrams for textbooks, for court cases, and so forth. And the abortionist takes forceps and goes in and grabs the arm or leg of a baby and rips it off. You see here the arms, the legs being ripped off of a living baby, by the way. Here you see the intestines and the body of the baby piece by piece just being pulled out. And finally the head is crushed and brought out not as a unified piece but in fragments. And these are the words of the abortionists themselves describing the procedure. So abortion is not an abstraction. It is the killing of a baby. And when we talk about it as an election issue, as somebody on Facebook was asking me the other day, well, you know, there don't seem to be many voters that consider this as an important issue. Well, on the contrary, yes, there are. Now, there's different ways of asking the question. If you just ask people, well, you know, what are the key issues in the nation? people are not going to necessarily put abortion at the top of that list or maybe even on that list at all. But if you ask them explicitly, well, in your consideration of candidates, does the candidate you vote for have to agree with you on the issue of abortion? Or does the topic of abortion influence your vote in a significant way? There's polling on this. There's polling on this that some of our colleagues in the pro-life movement have done, that I look at every election year. The polling after the election of 2016, just 2 years ago, showed that the number of those who voted who said that the abortion issue significantly influenced their vote was no less than 49%. And by the way, when you break that down, 31% of those voted pro-life, while only 18% pro-abortion. And in fact, this corresponds to patterns that we have seen in the same kind of polling following previous elections. So I put in context of what I'm saying here today that yes, indeed, this is a critical issue to a very large percentage of the voting public, and indeed, you have a significant advantage for pro-life. And when you consider how close so many races are and how close the races are right now in this midterm election for control, for example, of the House of Representatives in Congress, well, abortion matters. It matters, but that's not the only reason I want to focus on it here today, because no matter how many people it matters to or not, it is indeed the most fundamental moral issue that we deal with. Now, why is that true? Well, just look at it. The first reason why it's true, that it's the most fundamental issue, the most basic issue, just look at it. It is the killing of a baby. I mean, isn't this how we define civilization and distinguish civilized people from barbarians? Isn't this how we tell the difference between a person who has a conscience and someone who is completely devoid of conscience? Killing a baby? I mean, we just have to step back and look at this. I always say when we elect people in elections, we've got to elect public servants who know the difference between serving the public and killing the public. The first and only legitimate object of good government is the protection, the preservation of life, not the taking of life, our founding fathers said. Killing of a baby? If a politician can't respect the life of a little baby, how's he or she supposed to respect your life? In other words, this is a character issue. This is a fundamental issue that tells us whether or not a person has a conscience. What's the most basic good that you possess? What's the most fundamental right that you have? It's like the old saying, someone points a gun at you, your money or your life. Well, which is it going to be? Which are you going to give them? Your money or your life? Somebody says to you, you have a choice. I'm going to take away your house or I'm going to take away your life. Which do you choose? Somebody says to you, I'm going to take away your job or I'm going to take away your life. Which do you choose? The way we answer that fundamental question answers the question I'm raising today. What is the most fundamental issue? It's always life. I mean, in our day-to-day activities, we may be going about some very important business as we're driving along in our car, but if we hear a siren and if we see ambulances and fire trucks rolling down the same road that we're on, what happens? Everything stops to give preference to the vehicles that are going to save life. We might be going to do some very important things. We might have an important job interview. We may be going to buy some important groceries. We may be going to help serve lunch at a soup kitchen. But everything gives way to the saving of life. Even laws about trespass. Isn't it true? If you see a no trespassing sign, well, you're a law-abiding citizen. You're not going to trespass onto private property. But what if on the other side of that fence there you saw a child being attacked by a wild dog or an infant drowning in a swimming pool? You're going to worry about the no trespassing sign, or are you going to go save the life? Jesus himself talks about this in the gospel, doesn't he? When he was instructing the disciples about the importance of the Sabbath, but the relative importance of the Sabbath. And he said, who's not going to take care of his work animal if they need help on the Sabbath? What is more important, Jesus says, to preserve life or to take it? So the point is that it's common sense, it's history, it's experience that life takes precedence. And not only that, but then the second reason that we can assert that whether it's in this election or actually in any evaluation of our concerns in life, why abortion is the primary number one issue, is simply the arithmetic. Now, we only have a limited amount of time here. If you want to go into this more deeply, which I encourage you to do, on our website, priestsforlife.org, we have a statistics page, priestsforlife.org/statistics. And you can see there many of the statistics relating to the abortion problem nationwide and worldwide. That's the basis for the arithmetic that I want to consider here just for a moment. There are two basic sources to answer the question, how many abortions are taking place. One is the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, agency of the federal government. The other one is the Guttmacher Institute, an independent agency which actually gets the statistics from the abortion facilities around the country. CDC, on the other hand, receives those statistics in a passive kind of way from the states, and not all the states, including California, where about a quarter of the abortions occur, not all the states report to the CDC, which means that the CDC numbers are going to be lower. The Guttmacher Institutes numbers are going to be more accurate. In any case, you need to know that the numbers of abortions taking place in the United States right now, each year, are at about 1 million. 1 million lives a year. Do that many people die from heart disease? Heart disease is a little bit more than half of that. How about cancer? One of the most common diseases, unfortunately, right? The numbers of victims of cancer, a little bit more than half of that. And then any other disease, or if you include accidents, way, way, way less than that. In other words, the next in line in terms of reasons for death already are just a little more than half of the numbers of those being killed by abortion. So you want to talk about what should be first in our consideration about the problems that we're trying to solve. Because when we vote in elections, that's one of the things we're thinking of. How do we make America great again? How do we solve the problems we have? How do we reverse the things that don't make it great? Well, one of the things that don't make America great is abortion. And we're killing our own children. That's not greatness at all. In fact, that's the antithesis of greatness. And, Christians from all denominations respect Pope John Paul II on one of his visits here to America. He said, this was in the late 80s, he says, America, the very test of your greatness is how you treat the most vulnerable, including the unborn children. Just by the arithmetic, brothers and sisters, this is issue number one, simply because, let's say it plain and clear, nothing is taking more human life than abortion. Nothing. No crime, no disease, no natural disaster, no war, no act of terrorism, not poverty, not AIDS, certainly not global warming. Nothing is taking more human life than abortion. Let me show you two videos that bring this point home. The first one deals with the numbers of those Americans killed in war, comparing it to the numbers of abortions. And the second one talks about a number of different causes of death, but compares it to abortion specifically within the black community. I know you will be moved by these videos. Take a look. Well, friends, many of you may know my good friend and colleague, Mark Crutcher of Life Dynamics. He's responsible for that first video with all the pellets in the jars. And by the way, our friends up at Right to Life of Michigan made a very similar video where they do it by sound. You hear the sound of pellets hitting against a metal wall, and you hear this, again, very similar format. You hear the pellets representing war casualties, and then the ongoing sound of the ones that represent the abortion numbers. You may also know my friend and colleague Ryan Bomberger of the Radiance Foundation. He's responsible for that second video that you just saw, showing the impact of abortion on the black community. And again, nothing taking more life than abortion. And our friend, of course, our full-time associate here at Priests for Life, Alveda King, you have heard from many times, and she articulates this point very well also along with us. So, abortion as issue number one. I've talked to you about just by the fact of what it is. Life always takes preference. Number two, the arithmetic. Number three, let's talk about the logic of it. Why would the most important question for any political candidate or party be, where do you stand on abortion, more than anything else? Well, because of this, brothers and sisters. Without life, we don't have any other rights. Let's think about the other issues that are of importance. For example, unemployment is an issue. And praise God, as President Trump has been saying at his rallies, which I hope you are watching each and every one of them. There'll be more of them between now and Election Day. We've been spreading them everywhere. We want people to watch them. He's been pointing out the beautiful fact that the unemployment levels in our country are at their lowest point in 50 years. Unemployment among women at its lowest point in 65 years. Unemployment at its lowest point in African American community. I mean, this is great and tremendous progress. Now, employment is an important issue. Why is it an important issue? Well, people have a right to make a living, right? Why do they have a right to make a living? Because they have a right to live. Take poverty. Why is that an important issue? Well, because people have a right to food and clothing and shelter. Well, why do they have a right to those things? Well, because they have a right to live. Why is protection from terrorism an issue? Well, because people have a right to live. Every issue, if it's an issue at all, boils down to and is based on the right to life. Just follow the logic of it. If you say that you can take away the life of a baby in the womb. Now, by the way, the reason ministries like mine, Priests for Life, focus on abortion, we are my day, morning to night and during the night and 365 days a year is taken up with the issue of abortion. Why have I devoted my life to this? And why does the pro-life movement focus in on abortion? Not because we decided to focus on the unborn, but because Roe versus Wade did. When Roe versus Wade came down in 1973, it wasn't teenagers whose right to life it took away. It wasn't the elderly whose right to life it took away. It was the children in the womb in the first 9 months of their existence. So that was the unfair focus. That was the unfair targeting. That was when the unborn took center stage by those that were attacking them, by those that were depriving them of the right to life, by the policy that undermined their very existence. So because that emphasis came first, we emphasize it so that we can correct the problem. Now, if you take away their very right to life, what else have you taken away? Well, you've taken away that baby's education. You've taken away that baby's housing. You've taken away her health care. You've taken away her right to work. You've taken away her right to vote. You've taken away all her civil rights. You've taken away her right to be protected from terrorism. You've certainly taken away her right to immigration. You know who the first immigrant is, by the way? Some people like to compare in this election the importance of the immigration issue compared to the importance of abortion. You know who the first immigrant is? The child in the womb. And they're trying to cross the border of the womb into life in this existence outside of the mother's body, and they're not being allowed to do it. There is a crisis at the border. There's a crisis at the border of the womb. And the people at that border are not being deported and they're not being detained. They are being decapitated. Oh yeah, there's a border crisis, all right. The first immigrant, the first border crossing that needs to be allowed in the right way is the child trying to cross the border of his or her own mother's womb. So you take away their right to life, you've taken away every right that they have. And if a politician then tries to say, oh, well, I have a great health care plan, or I have a great education plan, I have a great plan for immigrants, all well and good, sir, ma'am, we'll listen to what your plan is. But if you're trying to tell me you have a good education plan, and meanwhile you think that babies in the womb can be killed by abortion, obviously whatever you think, whatever right to education you think there is, you believe that that belongs to some human beings, but not to all. Whatever your health care plan is, if you're pro-choice on abortion, you think those babies in the womb can be killed legally? I don't know what your health care plan is, but whatever idea you have in your head about the right to health care, obviously you think that that right belongs to some human beings, but not to all. And you can go on with all the other rights. You see what I'm saying? Well, if a person believes that basic rights belong to some human beings, but not to all, well then obviously those aren't human rights. And if a human right is a right that you have because you're human. Now, who can make you not human? Just think about this for a minute. You're human. Who can make you not human? Who can take away your humanity from you? Nobody. It inheres in you. It's essential to you. So I can't take away your humanity. That's why I can't take away your human rights. Unless I don't think they're human rights. Unless I think that those rights, whether it's to health care, education, the right to vote, the right to immigrate, the right to do whatever, the right to be protected from terrorism, whatever rights I think you have, either they're human rights, and if they're based in your humanity, because nobody can take away your humanity, then nobody can take away those rights. But let's say I don't believe that they're based in your humanity, which any pro-choice politician does not believe that, because he or she is advocating for the right to health care, but saying some people can be destroyed in the womb. So what's the basis then for these rights that they say you and I have? Maybe it's the law. It's the basis of whether the law says they have rights, because then they'll go back to Roe v. Wade and they'll say, well, even though you show me, Father Frank, that diagram, and yeah, that looks like a baby, and yeah, I might even admit that that's a human being, like the abortionists admit. Nevertheless, Roe v. Wade said, the law said that abortion is legal. Well, you see what they're saying, brothers and sisters? And the Democrats are great at this because that's the party of abortion. What they're saying is, if the law says you're not human, then you're not human. If the law says you have a right, then you have it. But if the court changes its mind, changes the law with their activist judges, well, then you don't have those rights anymore. Why? Well, yeah, you're still human, but guess what? The court just said you don't have that right. And you see, this is very problematic because if the government can say that the unborn are not human, well, why can't they say you and I are not human if they want to say that? Because you see, the evidence that the baby in the womb is human is the same evidence that you and I are. How would you prove to somebody that you're human? Think about it for a minute. You're talking to them, but they're saying to you, you're not human. I don't believe you're human. How would you prove to them that you're human? You wouldn't argue it. You would show them your DNA. Just take any cell from your body and say, here, we're going to have this analyzed. Well, we got these, you see these commercials nowadays, right? I don't know if any of you have done it, 23andMe and all these DNA genetic analysis commercials. Well, go ahead. Send a little piece of your skin or whatever they ask for over to the company. They'll tell you you're human. Well, you know what? The same thing would happen if you extract a cell from those babies in the womb. The same way you would prove that you're human, you would prove the baby in the womb is human. And yet the Democrats, They're coming along and saying, well, some humans have human rights, the ones that the court tells us are human, and the others, they don't have any human rights at all. You take away their life, you've taken away their health care, their education, their right to vote, their right to work, everything. These are dangerous people. Dangerous. Because now they're saying everything is on shifting sands. Everything's negotiable. They can, unless the unborn are protected, we are all in danger. Let me say that again. Unless the children in the womb have their right to life safeguarded, we are all in danger. Because then you have to question what's the foundation for securing any right at all. So we look at the arithmetic of it, we look at the logic of it, and then let's look at the teaching. Now here, I know that many of you are disciples of Jesus Christ in denominations other than the Catholic Church. Perfectly fine. This great movement, this movement for pro-life, this movement for America is composed of Christians of all walks of life and people of other religions too who are not Christians. But I want to give some quotes for you that popes and bishops of the Catholic Church have said, because they're speaking here about basic human rights. This is not, specifically Catholicism to the exclusion of anything else. They're talking about basic human rights, and I want to read some of these basic quotes. And building on the theme that I was just articulating, again, someone respected throughout the world, John Paul II, now considered a saint in the Catholic Church, he wrote this document called The Gospel of Life, Evangelium Vitae. And I want to read a few sentences from here that are very, very powerful, because he talks about what happens to a state when they legalize abortion. And after you hear these words, you're going to realize why this is not just one issue among many. This is the foundation of every issue. And that's a good way to summarize what I was just saying. No, none of us in the pro-life movement say, and certainly I would never say, abortion is the only issue that there is. To say that doesn't make any sense. We all know that there are many different issues. But friends, again, why is an issue at all if it doesn't impact human life? So attacking the right to life or denying the right to life denies the heart and core and soul of every issue. Now, the church has said this in various ways in all its documents. Let me give you an example here. These are powerful words from John Paul II. Number 20 of Evangelium Vitae, he said, this is what happens when a government legalizes the killing of babies by abortion. He says, any reference to common values and to a truth binding on everyone is lost. Social life ventures onto the shifting sands of complete relativism. Those are other words for saying what I was just saying. None of us is safe then. Was it just because the court said it? Well, they could say something different tomorrow. Let we continue. At that point, he says, everything's negotiable. Everything's open to bargaining. Even the first of the fundamental rights, the right to life. This is what is also happening at the level of politics and government. The original and inalienable right to life is questioned or denied on the basis of a parliamentary vote or the will of one part of the people, even if it is the majority. So the right ceases to be such because it is no longer firmly founded on the inviolable dignity of the person. Like I was just saying, you have human rights because you're human and nobody can make you not human. But it's made subject to the will of the stronger part. In this way, now listen to these words, democracy, contradicting its own principles, moves towards a form of totalitarianism. Democrat Party, take notice, he's talking about you. Democracy, contradicting its own principles, moves towards a form of totalitarianism. The state is no longer the common home where all can live together on the basis of principles of fundamental equality, but is transformed into a tyrant state. Now, that's something to think about. What does John Paul II say about governments that legalize abortion? They become tyrant states. What would he say about a political party that stands for unlimited abortion like the Democrat Party does in America today? It advocates a tyrant state. Tyrant state. Don't just tell me you disagree with me about policy. Don't just tell me you have a different philosophy, but you still love America. You don't love America. You're undermining America. You're attacking America at its very roots, at its very principles. This is why no Democrat should get a single vote in this election. I go on. The appearance of strict respect for legality is maintained. But really what we have here is only the tragic caricature of legality. The democratic ideal, which is only truly such when it acknowledges and safeguards the dignity of every human person, is betrayed in its very foundations. How is it still possible to speak of the dignity of every human person when the killing of the weakest and most innocent is permitted? That's a good question. You know that a lot of these Democrat members of Congress, when Pope Francis visited the United States, oh, you should have seen this. They had done it years ago on another occasion too. And I think tomorrow morning I'll talk more about this in my morning broadcast at 10 o'clock. They wrote a letter to the Pope. These Democrat members of Congress, they wrote a letter to the Pope. Oh, Pope Francis, we welcome you to the United States, and we're so happy that you're coming because we stand with you as we serve and advocate for the poor, the vulnerable, and the weakest among us. These are people with a 100% pro-abortion voting record, daring to say to the Pope, we stand with you because we stand up for the most vulnerable among us. You know what the definition of psychosis is? A break with reality. You saw the pictures of those babies a little while ago. You saw the medical diagram of what abortion does, ripping off the arms and legs of a child, crushing the head, bringing out the skull in fragments. And you're going to stand up and tell me that you think that should be legal, and then you're going to have, I don't know what it is. Is it the audacity or is it the psychotic break that is required to then say at the same time, in the same breath, oh, but I stand up for the weakest and the most vulnerable among us. My friends, do we laugh or do we cry? Do we put our head down and wonder what in the world is going on? Or do we stand up and scream at the top of our lungs? I'm telling you, I got some real problems with the Democrats that are doing this and saying this. It's psychotic. Let me go back to what John Paul II is saying here, because this is one of my favorite and one of the most powerful quotes here. He says, when this happens, this legalizing of abortion, which then betrays the very principles of democracy, turns the state into a tyrant state. Listen to what he says. When this happens, the process leading to the breakdown of a genuinely human coexistence and the disintegration of the state itself has already begun. And then he goes on to say, this is the death of true freedom. Wow. And you're going to say, and some people are going to try to say to us, abortion is just one issue? This is the foundation of civilization. Whether or not government, law, public policy, the state, politics is going to recognize everyone as equal. That's the starting principle. Is it going to recognize everyone as equal or not? Wow. There's nothing more basic than that. Now, we can go on for a long time, and actually we've already gone on pretty long this evening. I'm going to keep it for a little while longer because I want to show you some powerful videos. Don't go anywhere. But I want to point out a web page on our site, on our website. Everything here can be found from prolifevote.com, and there's a section down at the bottom of church teaching, and one of the documents that one of the pages that we link to is a page that talks about the theme that I'm explaining to you here today, with regard to abortion being the most basic, the most fundamental, the most important issue. And I want to just point out to you a couple of other sources. On that document, you see a lot of quotes, especially if you're Catholic, but not just for Catholics. You know, you can use these because they're authoritative quotes from the church, and they make a lot of sense. For example, on that page, the first is an old quote, 1974, talking about life as the most fundamental and the condition for all the other rights, as I've said. But then John Paul II said this in 1988. He said, and this is a word of warning to the politicians, "The common outcry which is justly made on behalf of human rights, for example, the right to health, to home, to work, to family, to culture, is false and illusory. If the right to life, the most basic and fundamental right of the condition for all other personal rights, is not defended with maximum determination." Those are good words, false and illusory. So any of these candidates come into you asking for your vote, and meanwhile they are in favor of the protection of the killing of babies, don't listen to them, because their advocacy for those other human rights, John Paul II says, is false and illusory. We're going to hear a quote from a cardinal in a moment. I'm going to play a video for you, but let me just show you one other important source here. In 1998, 20 years ago, the United States Catholic bishops issued a document called Living the Gospel of Life. And it's really a great document. I have some long quotes from it here on this page. They say, we must begin. This is the basic principle, they say, which is simple when we consider our public life and all the different issues. They say we must begin with a commitment never to intentionally kill or collude in the killing of any innocent human life. Never. And then in section 23 of that document, as we go down this page a little bit, they use the analogy of the house. This is a very good analogy to explain all of this in other words. Let me just read this quote. All politics, any politics of human life must work to resist the violence of war and the scandal of capital punishment. Any politics of human dignity must seriously address issues of racism, poverty, hunger, employment, education, housing, and healthcare. Therefore, Catholics should eagerly involve themselves as advocates for the weak and marginalized in all these areas. Catholic public officials are obliged to address each of these issues as they seek to build consistent policies which promote respect for the human person at all stages of life. But being right in such matters can never excuse a wrong choice regarding direct attacks on innocent human life. Indeed, the failure to protect and defend life in its most vulnerable stages, Democrats, pay attention, renders suspect any claims to the rightness of positions in other matters affecting the poorest and least powerful of the human community. Where in the world does this idea come from about, oh, we're the party of the little guy, when you've abandoned, Democrats, the littlest guy? You want to please explain that to me? So the bishops go on. If we understand the human spirit as the human person as the temple of the Holy Spirit, the living house of God, then these latter issues fall logically into place as the crossbeams and walls of that house. All direct attacks on innocent human life, such as abortion, strike at the house's foundation. These directly and immediately violate the human person's most fundamental right, the right to life. Neglect of these issues is the equivalent of building our house on sand. Cardinal Bernardo Martino served for many years as Pope John Paul II's representative at the United Nations. So he was dealing with international issues about human rights and human dignity. And then he became a Vatican official in charge of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, and that was the office out of which came a major document, again under John Paul II, called the Compendium of the Social Teaching of the Church. Cardinal Martino has also been a good friend of mine over the years, one of our key advisors for Priests for Life. And in one of the interviews I did with him, he spoke about this point that we've been explaining here about how, without defending the children in the womb, without defending the first right that we have, all this other talk about human rights cannot even continue. Listen to him explain this in this interview clip, Cardinal Renato Martino.
Voting is a right as well as a duty. But it is also essential to be informed and to vote as your heart and your conscience tell you. That a person, a Catholic, or anyone with a well-formed conscience, a well-formed understanding of right and wrong, good and evil, can never vote for a political program or law which contradicts the fundamental contents of faith and morals. A Catholic politician or a Catholic voter cannot separate himself or herself from his or her moral responsibility. You cannot choose when and where to be Catholic, and that includes political life and voter responsibility. The Holy Father speaks of the protection of life as the fundamental realization and respect for human rights. Without that realization, without that respect for the right to life, no other discussion of human rights can continue. It must be based upon the foundation of human dignity and the right to life.
You know, this is one of the ads that we have placed in major newspapers as in various election cycles in the past. Shows John Paul, whom I quoted extensively. Also shows someone else who's beloved by Christians across the body of Christ, that is Mother Teresa. And to add to the words of John Paul II and the bishops, which I already quoted for you, I want to point out Mother Teresa's words when she spoke to the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington in 1994. You remember that, where the Clintons and the Gores were sitting there. And when she said these words about abortion, they were the only people who were still sitting. Everyone else stood up and gave a thunderous round of applause, and they were nervously fiddling with their water glasses and whispering to each other. But here's what Mother Teresa said: "I feel that the greatest destroyer of peace today is abortion, because it is a war against the child, a direct killing of the innocent child, murder by the mother herself. And if we accept that a mother can kill even her own child, how can we tell other people not to kill one another? Any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love, but to use any violence to get what they want. This is why the greatest destroyer of love and peace is abortion." Well, in one of my later broadcasts this week, I'm going to actually play the clip of her saying that, because I have that video clip also. But I wanted to add that to what the point that we're making here tonight, that indeed there is no issue more fundamental in any election than abortion. Now, unfortunately, as I've been saying also throughout this broadcast, the Democrat Party has abandoned any kind of concern for the child in the womb. It's like they pretend the child isn't there. They don't speak the words. They don't see any constitutional rights. They don't see any humanity in that baby. And in fact, here's something to pay attention to. Listen to any speech by any of these candidates that are in favor of legal abortion, and you tell me if they ever once describe the procedure. Do they ever use the word forceps or arms and legs, blood, decapitation, dismemberment? Do they ever use any of these terms? You know where you will find these terms? In the medical textbooks that describe what an abortion is. Alveda King, in my interview with her the other day for these broadcasts, we were recalling the time that we went to the Democrat offices in Congress, bringing the diagrams, like I showed you a moment ago, of the abortion procedure. We went in and we talked to top legislative aides to some of the top Democrat senators and congressmen, and we said, look, baby is ripped apart, dismembered, decapitated. Here's the medical diagram. Here's the medical description of it. When the congressman or congresswoman or senator says the word abortion, is this what they mean? And you wouldn't believe how many of these legislative aides said to us, well, gee, we never heard this question. I don't know. And I turned to them and I said, you mean to tell me that you're the key advisor for this senator, this congressman, on the issue of abortion, and you don't even know what he means when he says the word? It was absolutely astonishing. There they are advocating abortion. They don't even know what it is. They're certainly not going to tell the voters what it is. And you see, that's my point. When you hear these speeches in favor of abortion, whether it's on the floor of the Congress or whether it's out on the campaign trail, listen to what they say and listen to what they don't say. What they will never say is how the procedure is performed, what it does to the baby, or what it is in the first place. And that's a classic sign, brothers and sisters, that someone is wrong on an issue. When they're skirting the issue, when they're standing up for the legality of something, but they won't even tell you what that something is. You challenge them. Challenge them. Now, somebody else who challenged, well, let me point out here how the party has gotten worse and worse. In their platform that is currently their official platform, was issued 2 years ago, not only do they continue to stand for unrestricted abortion, the Democrat Party, but also they call you and me to pay for it. They included in the platform a call for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, which protects our tax dollars from going for abortion, and the Democrats want to get rid of that. Let the government money, let the taxpayer money flow for the killing of these babies. Not only that, but Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez said this not long ago. Quote, every Democrat, like every American, should support a woman's right to make her own choices about her body and her health. Notice he's not talking about dismemberment. That is not negotiable and should not change city by city or state by state at a time when women's rights are under assault from the White House, the Republican Congress, and in states across the country. We must speak up for this principle as loudly as ever and with one voice. Every candidate who runs as a Democrat should do the same, because every woman should be able to make her own health choices, period. Well, Perez, you got it wrong. And the reason you got it wrong is that you're talking about something different than what abortion is. Sure, it's easy, isn't it? Oh, you'll get applause lines all the time talking about women's choices about body, women's health choices. Yeah, I could get applause lines about that too, and I care about that. Why didn't you talk about dismemberment? Mr. Perez, Mr. Democrat candidates all over the place, why don't you talk about dismemberment? Because then the voters their jaws are going to drop, and their eyebrows are going to raise, and their mouths are going to open. They're going to say, what? Let me make the point, brothers and sisters, using another question. If a candidate came along to you and said, I support terrorism, I think what the terrorists did was fine. They have a right to do it. I support them. Would your response as a voter, or do you think anyone's response as a voter would be, well, sir, I disagree with you on terrorism, but what's your health care plan? Nobody's response would be that. Because we realize that certain positions disqualify a candidate from public office completely. And that when you hear them take that position, there's no need to ask them any further questions. Because that position is so contrary to public service, so contrary to the principles on which America and civilization itself are founded, that you can't possibly support them for public office. So it is with the matter of abortion. Because when you compare abortion with terrorism, now we're not comparing the mothers with the terrorists because the mothers are scared, confused. We help them every day. Pregnancy centers help them. We're engaged in healing after abortion. We're not condemning the moms. They're pressured terribly, and they're confused, and they're desperate and afraid. I'm talking about the procedure itself and what the abortionist is doing, reaching in there with those forceps and tearing that body apart. What's the difference morally between the taking of an innocent human life if the human is 5 inches tall rather than 5 feet tall, and if the instrument of death is surgical forceps rather than airplanes being flown into buildings? You tell me what the difference is. Brothers and sisters, Cardinal Dolan, and we have this link also on our webpage, wrote an article not long ago in the Wall Street Journal, this was from March of this year, called "The Democrats Abandon Catholics." Very good article to read. I ask you to go to our site. If you go to the prolifevote.com, and then you go to the comparison, you go to the page about the candidates. There's a page for candidate information. How do you assess the candidates? And one of the links there is to this article in English and in Spanish by Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Archbishop of New York. He says the Democrats have abandoned Catholics, and one of the key ways he explains they do this is in regard to abortion. And he mentions that the right to life in the baby, of the baby in the womb, has been rejected by the party of our youth. An esteemed pro-life Democrat in Illinois, Representative Dan Lipinski, whom also I know well, effectively was blacklisted by his own party. And then the Cardinal makes reference to the quote from Chairman Perez that I just read for you as well. More sobering, he writes, what is already the most radical abortion license in the country may soon be even more morbidly expanded. He's talking about Democrat efforts in New York to expand abortion even more. He said under this act, doctors would not be required to care for a baby who survives an abortion. And in fact, 166 Democrats who are running for the House of Representatives right now in this election voted earlier this year not even to protect babies born alive. Yes, you heard me correctly. Yes, it's true. I'm not making it up. Look it up. The Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act had to be voted on by Congress this past January to protect babies born alive after a failed abortion. 183 Democrats in the House voted against it. 166 of them are up for re-election right now. You don't let them ask for a single vote unless you challenge them as to why they can't vote to keep babies alive. Well, I want to show you one more video clip. And let this be a call to action for this election. We're going to raise our hands. It's called Raise Your Hand. We're going to raise our hands because we're going to speak up for the unborn. We're going to raise our hands because we're going to go into the voting booth and we're going to vote for public servants who know the difference between serving the public and killing the public. We're going to raise our hands fearlessly, courageously. We're going to raise our hands standing with our president, standing with this Republican Congress, which has voted time and time and time again to protect these babies and will continue to do so in the new Congress, and they will make progress if they have and keep and increase their majority. That's up to you whether that happens. But let's look at this beautiful, stirring video called Raise Your Hand. Wow, powerful video, isn't it? You can find that also on our website. You know, we really are moved by that video every time we show it, every time we share it with us. I'd like to know your comments about it. Let me know right now as you're watching this Facebook what you thought about that raise your hand video. Our own Vice Chairman, Jerry Horn, Senior Vice President of Priests for Life, came up with that idea and created that video some years ago. I'd like to answer one of the questions that's come in during this broadcast. Good question from Betty, who asks, Father, what is an appropriate age to discuss this with children? Yes, thanks, Betty, because, as you know, the abortion industry is targeting our children. Believe it or not, and I look closely at abortion statistics and the reports from various state departments of health, and I have seen records from the state departments of health on abortions done on children as young as 9. Now, everyone's body is a little bit different. If you think of how can someone be pregnant at that age. Children, on record, abortions as early as the age of 9. Obviously, young girls, young teens are being targeted, deliberately targeted, by the propaganda machine and the industry of abortion. So we're in a war here, and we've got to think very carefully of how to protect our children. Now, second basic principle of an answer to this question is that you as parents know your children best, and you as parents have the primary responsibility for the education of your own children. You're the ones that need to deal with their questions and need to gently and strongly lead them on the path of understanding the realities of life and the complexities of life and the sadnesses and tragedies of life like abortion. Having said all that, it depends on what aspect of this we convey. There are aspects of this whole abortion issue that we can convey to children at a very young age. I was recently invited to speak to a school, and they brought in the grades 7 to 12, and I was talking with the 7th graders, and I said, hey, what if there was a rule in the school here that lunch wasn't going to be served to 7th graders anymore? 7th graders have to go hungry, but 8th graders through 12, they can eat to their heart's content. And of course, children have a very strong sense of fairness. So they said, oh, well, that's completely ridiculous. We would rebel. And then I led them to, think about, well, what if other kinds of privileges and protections that we have were taken away from younger people? What if protection was taken away from babies? I also love to do a thing when I'm preaching at children's masses, and it has always worked perfectly. I'll ask one of the children to come up and help me with the homily. I'll look for the youngest child who's not afraid, ready and willing to do it. Call them up. Let's say I have little Jimmy there. Say, Jimmy, look out at all those people. Are they bigger than you? Yeah. Are they stronger than you? Yeah. Are they smarter than you? Yeah. Now, Jimmy, are they more special than you? No. Now, we never rehearse it, but the children always get it right. They understand instinctively that how special a person is, or whether they should be treated fairly, does not depend on how small they are or how weak they are. This is where we start in conveying this message. And I often say to the children, some mommies, some daddies are afraid to be mommies and daddies. And we have to help them, and we have to say, don't be afraid. You're not alone. We're all there to help you. We love you. So these are some of the ways, you try to instill these basic principles before you start talking about the biology of it. And when we start talking about the biology of the human body, again, obviously this is a very sensitive issue. The parents are in charge. Parents are the ones that need to decide. They know best their child, the family dynamics. they know best when they're ready, and they need to be running the engine here. But when we're invited, I mean, obviously, early teens and we go into schools all the time. We've got to be talking to them about it. I think of the anti-drug commercials, so powerful. And one of them says, start talking to your children about drugs before they do, they being the ones who want to sell them to them. Same thing is true about abortion. Start talking to them before the people who are selling it start talking to them. So a little proactive energy here is very important, and communication. Well, we've been talking to you tonight, my friends, about the fact that there is no issue more important than abortion. It's simply that way. And the right to life is the foundation of all the other rights. So let's be strong in this election. I told you at the outset, some 49% of voters from the 2016 election said abortion did impact their vote. It was one of the factors that helped them decide. Let it be the same again this time. And let's point out to people the implications of this for all the other issues as well. And by the way, at every level of government, it's important. Because again, number one, it's a character issue, and number two, people at the lower ranks of government are the ones who start rising the ladder and end up getting into Congress or higher. I want to conclude then with the prayer for the elections, electionprayer.com. Please be sure to go there regularly. Tell your pastors about it. They may want to promote this in the churches. Link to it from your websites, electionprayer.com. And may we say this prayer together now as we come to the culmination of this midterm election. O God, we acknowledge you today as Lord, not only of individuals, but of nations and governments. We thank you for the privilege of being able to organize ourselves politically, and of knowing that political loyalty does not have to mean disloyalty to you. We thank you for your law, which our founding fathers acknowledged and recognized as higher than any human law. We thank you for the opportunity that this election year puts before us to exercise our solemn duty not only to vote, but to influence countless others to vote, and to vote correctly. Lord, we pray that your people may be awakened. Let them realize that while politics is not their salvation, their response to you requires that they be politically active. Awaken your people to know that they are not called to be a sect fleeing the world, but rather a community of faith renewing the world. Awaken them that the same hands lifted up to you in prayer are the hands that pull the lever in the voting booth, that the same eyes that read your word are the eyes that read the names on the ballot, and that they do not cease to be Christians when they enter the voting booth. Awaken your people to a commitment to justice, to the sanctity of marriage and the family, to the dignity of each individual human life, and to the truth that human rights begin when human lives begin, and not one moment later. Lord, we rejoice today that we are citizens of your kingdom. May that make us all the more committed to being faithful citizens on earth. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Electionprayer.com, electionprayer.com. Please help me promote it. There's people you can reach, brothers and sisters, each of you, that I cannot reach. People on your own lists, people on your own social media, people on your own email contacts. Please reach them with all this information that we're giving you. And thanks for spending the time with me today. Please share this video, and let's get a bigger and bigger and bigger audience so that we can really impact this election. It's what we need to do, and I thank you for your commitment to doing it. Stay tuned now for these special messages that will follow, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life.
Hello, I'm Evangelist Alveda King. I'm blessed to work with Priests for Life, one of the largest and most visible pro-life ministries in the world. Our whole team relies on your financial support to be able to do our work, produce our programs, and travel the world to advocate for the unborn. May I ask you to support us generously? Go today to prolifedonation.org and give as generous a gift as you can. We appreciate it and will pray for you each day.
Many pro-life people worked hard to elect President Donald Trump. That hard work has paid off for the pro-life movement and the unborn. Here are just some of the pro-life accomplishments of the president and his administration. Number 10. President Trump has called on Congress to pass key pro-life legislation to protect babies and defund the abortion industry. Number 9. President Trump has filled his administration with strong pro-life people in key positions. Number 8. President Trump has ended the HHS mandate, forcing employers to cover abortion in health insurance. Number 7. President Trump set up new conscience protections for those who refuse to participate in abortions. Number 6. President Trump ended the secrecy about which health insurance plans cover abortion. Number 5. President Trump stopped funding the abortion industry overseas. Number 4. President Trump protected your tax dollars from funding abortion through Title X. Number 3. President Trump gave the states the right to stop funding Planned Parenthood and abortion. Number 2. President Trump appointed 2 pro-life Supreme Court justices and dozens of other pro-life federal judges. And the number one thing, the first and greatest thing that President Trump did for the pro-life movement was to keep Hillary Clinton out of the White House. To all of you who voted for President Trump in 2016, congratulations. Your vote paid off. But be sure to get out and vote again this 2018 midterm election so that the president has a strong pro-life Congress to enable him to continue winning more victories for the cause of life.